Military Forum entitled Holistic Health and Fitness, a topic near and dear to our hearts. The Association of the United States Army, your professional association, plays a crucial role in supporting and educating soldiers, Army civilian employees, and industry partners, all of whom support our Army. AUSA offers a variety of forums and events throughout the year for your professional development. AUSA amplifies the Army's narrative to audiences and to help further the association's mission of being a voice for the Army and support for the soldier. Of course, we cannot do this alone. AUSA relies on its members to help tell the Army story and to support our soldiers and their families. A strong membership base is vitally important to our advocacy efforts in Congress, the Pentagon, the Defense Industrial Base, and to the public and communities across the country through AUSA's 122 chapters within the United States and in 9 additional countries internationally. So, who here is a member of AUSA? Let's have a little raise of hands. Thank you. And for those who raise their hands, we thank you. For everyone else, unless you opted out when you registered, you are now a new basic no-cost member of AUSA, and we thank you for that also. However, if you are not already a premium member and would like to elevate your member benefits, please visit the AUSA Member Zone located at the L Street Bridge near Halls D&E, or sign up online at ausa.org/membership. AUSA is a membership organization. We can't do it without you. You help AUSA be an effective voice for the total Army and provide support for soldiers and their families. On behalf of General Brown, AUSA's President and CEO, and the rest of the AUSA team, AUSA thanks these speakers with a small token of appreciation. This year we've gifted our speakers with an AUSA umbrella. We appreciate you being with us today. I know the weather's really nice, but you never know. Now I'll turn it over to our moderator, Eric Bartel, co-founder of Echelon.
Thank you. Thank you and welcome to AUSA's Contemporary Military Forum titled Holistic Health and Fitness. Thank you for being here today for what I know will be an engaging and thought-provoking look at health and fitness across our Army. My name is Eric Bartel, and I'll be your moderator this afternoon. But first, I'd like to take a second to say what an esteemed honor it is to be a part of this panel as we discuss the initiatives currently underway that will and already are having an impact on the readiness of our Army and the welfare of our soldiers. Ask any elite athlete, executive, performer at the top of their game, and they will tell you that having the right resources, preparation, and mindset is the difference between winning and losing. Since leaving the Army, I've worked with top performers from sports to business. I've built programming for millions of daily grinders, and I've been featured in hundreds of times in the biggest fitness publications around the world. I've trained, certified, and mentored hundreds of veterans to start their own careers in fitness, and I've spent the last 3 years digging deep into the nutrition and supplement space that deals with the needs of our soldiers through my current company. And while I accomplished all of that after getting out of the Army, and that's probably why I'm up here today, I'd like to think that my passion for serving others was born during my time when I was a leader in the U.S. Army, and that's made everything I accomplished post that possible. My passion to not only be all I can be, but to see others do the same was born in uniform, which is why the Holistic Health and Fitness program is so meaningful to me. Because when I got out of the Army in 2018, it was still very much operating on an industrial one-size-fits-all model focused almost exclusively on the physical domain. I couldn't be more proud to see how far that culture has changed in just the past few years to an individualized, holistic approach to fitness, which includes 5 readiness domains: physical, mental, nutrition, sleep, and spiritual readiness. Because while you walk through the exhibit halls and you see all the great equipment and tools that this industry has to offer, it is ultimately the soldier who remains the Army's most valuable weapon system. And H2F has proven to be the unequivocal next step in investing in soldier readiness and to ensure they remain the most lethal force on the battlefield. The H2F system is leveraging evidence-based information and best practices to proactively improve physical and non-physical readiness that leads to optimal performance, reduced injury rates, improved rehabilitation after injury, and more lethal soldiers and teams. If you've ever had a conversation with General Mingus, you'll learn very quickly that he is not only passionate about this, but extremely versed in everything from periodization to alactic conditioning. I firmly believe that investing in health and human performance optimization benefits our soldiers. It ensures the sustainment of an agile and adaptive Army, ready to provide the nation with a professional, lethal, and decisive force that will win against any adversary. And while culture changes can be hard, and at times painstakingly slow, it's amazing to see how the Army's fitness culture is shifting with H2F. I've personally witnessed it change over the last few years, visiting the 101st and tying in with their H2F teams. So without further ado, I've done enough talking about H2F, and it's time to introduce our esteemed panelists. I'm thrilled to be joined by the 39th Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, General James Mingus.
Oh.
No.
Well, go ahead and introduce the rest of them, or you want me to go now?
I was waiting for applause.
Oh.
That's more like it.
See this guy right here with extremely gray hair? We go back since like 40 years.
That's why he didn't clap?
Yeah, that's why they didn't clap. Mike said, no way, man.
Lieutenant General David Francis, the Deputy Commander for TRADOC, and the Commanding General for the Center for Initial Military Training.
Hello.
And we are also joined by Dr. Jennifer Trilk, Professor and Director of Lifestyle Medicine at the University of South Carolina, School of Medicine in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm going to go down the line for each of you to give your opening remarks, and then we will open it up for Q&A from the audience. A couple of admin notes on that. There's going to be note cards at your chairs. If you'd like to submit a question to our panel, go ahead and fill out the note card and just hold it up, and someone will come around and grab it from you, and they'll bring it up to me. There's not microphones. Never mind that note. General Mingus, the floor is yours.
Okay. How's everybody doing today? It's good to see some of the folks I saw yesterday out on the floor came up for this. The Director of the Army Staff and our Inspector General, a little bit later, they're going to demonstrate the proper way to do a weighted pull-up. I think we've got the proper stuff set for you guys because they live this every day. But I'm super excited about this, and we do have a relatively big kind of a soft announcement that I'll hit up front. Dave's going to hit where we're going with this from a programmatic perspective, what we're seeing on a return of investment, and then Doc is going to kind of roll it up from just a practical life perspective and how she lives this every day and how it ties back and why she's so excited. 'Cause she's already been doing this for a very, very long time in the other sector, and why she's excited that the Army has kind of adopted this. So I just finished a panel with the Undersecretary of the Army on our network, and it is the Chief and the Secretary's #1 modernization priority, rightfully so, because it sits at the center of everything we do from a combined arms maneuver perspective and a joint force standpoint. But on the human side, I can't think of anything more important that our Army can do is to give this to our soldiers. And not to use a outused phrase, but better, stronger, faster. I mean, it is absolutely and it saves lives, and it's going to do. We're going to talk about all the amazing things that this does for our soldiers. So who's been to Fort Carson? So you remember when you sit at Fort Carson, you stand there at the bottom and you look at Pikes Peak. 9 months out of the year, it's kind of snow covered. H2F versus APFT, the old Army program. Take a squad from both, train them for a year, and say, ready, set, go. You're going to race to the top of Pikes Peak, which sits just over 14,000 feet. Squad from that's been doing H2F for a year gets to the top about the same time that the old squad doing our old techniques. The difference, though, is that squad that's been doing H2F for about a year are going to rip the other people's arms off, and then they're going to bludgeon them on the back end of that, because it takes a much more holistic approach to how we get after that. And that's, I mean, being a close combat, closing with the enemy to destroy them is a brutal, tough business. And if you've ever been in that environment and seen what it takes, and I don't care if you're a transporter, I don't care if you're an infantryman. I don't care what you do, because you never know where that contact is going to occur. And so there used to be this notion that only our close combat forces needed to be strong, agile, fast, and all that other stuff. No. Every soldier in our Army needs to be able to do this, because you just never know when that contact. Who knew what was going to happen to Jessica Lynch? That was not that long ago. So the criticality of this across our Army, it cannot be understated. I've also personally, so the folks that are here that are familiar with the Ranger Athlete Warrior program, I was there when Rich Clark and Paula Camera and a bunch of other folks unveiled this, began to pilot this. We've got a lot of programs very similar to this in the SOF community, whether it's Thor for our SF community. But in the Ranger Regiment, I personally was there when we built the Ranger Athlete Warrior program. I took that program and almost mirrored it identically when I was a brigade commander at 4th AD at Fort Carson, which is why the Pikes Peak analogy. And when we deployed, I am convinced that it saved lives. And it knocked down, I mean, and the one stat that I'll give you is that that same brigade went to the same battle space in about a year and a half apart from those two rotations. And the non-battle injury rate between the rotation before we implemented Mountain Athlete Warrior and before went from 10, 11% non-battle injury rates to less than 5%. That one stat alone ought to tell you that this is absolutely, Dave's going to talk about how it basically pays for itself. And now we're implementing this across the Army, and it's going to be incredibly powerful. Now, and that is kind of the thing we want to announce today. So the first time I met with the H2F team, when this journey began, we started with 28 brigades, and we went to 50-some brigades, and then we've now resourced it to about 111 brigades. That's what is laid into our budget to resource this to 111. And the chief and I looked at each other, is like, is this an Army program or not? And the answer is, it's an Army program. This is for the entire Army. And so the under myself and others, we're going to figure out, okay, now how do we lay that in so that we can, everybody that can have the benefits of what the holistic health and fitness can bring to them. Our biggest challenge, honestly, and well, we can go deeper into it when we get to question and answer, but how do we get after our Guard and Reserve? Because when you only meet 2 days a month, how does this work when you're not at drill? How does this work when you're doing a day job during the month? So anyway, those are some things but we are absolutely committed to making sure that our Guard and Reserve folks are taken care of, because when they go, they got to be just as strong and fast as everybody else. Okay, just go ahead. I've got a couple charts here. I just want to get some thoughts going. So the middle portion talks about what H2F is. So when you see the 5 pillars, you see do we have one of our Pentagon things, triangles laying around here somewhere that kind of lays out the 5 pillars of what's in H2F: mind, body, soul, nutrition, and sleep. Those are the basic elements of what makes, but there's some other pieces on the left and right of this that make this very, very important. Culture, governance, programmatics, equipments and facilities, personnel, leader. I put this up there because even though this is an Army program, we've resourced to 111, we're going to the whole Army. Many of these things, if you're not one of the H2F brigades that are going to get fielded in this year or next year, you may have to wait till 27 or 28. You have these facilities now. Take advantage of them. You don't have to wait till Dave shows up and says, here's your H2F program. You can begin to implement this now. Do not wait. We have on the team sitting there around, if you need some information on the back end of this thing, we have virtual components of holistic health and fitness that you can tap into today, and you don't even have to be a leader. You can just be an individual soldier that you're working with our centralized team to work through that. On the right-hand side of the slide, the two distinctions that I wanted to point out was muscular endurance and cardiovascular endurance. The Pikes Peak analogy, that was our old program. But it didn't take into account all the other things that are important to making sure that our soldiers can do what they need on the modern battlefield. If you do not understand the basic essence, so we talk a lot about we need soldiers who are data literate. We need leaders that are data literate. We need folks that understand technology. We need soldiers and leaders that understand this too. The ability to assess, program, and execute functional fitness tied to the cognitive, tied to the nutrition, tied to the importance of sleep. If you're not doing a little bit of self-education on your part, just like you're trying to figure out how to work your computer, then we are not moving in the direction, and kind of going back to you shouldn't wait until somebody shows up. That will help, that will augment, but we all need to get educated on how this all works together. Now, what makes this harder? Go ahead and go to the next chart. If you were Jamal Lewis, who I happened to meet when I was teaching at the University of Tennessee, went on to played for the Ravens, almost broke the single-season rushing record. Amazing athlete. I mean, one of the most gifted athletes I've ever personally met and walked around with, and just pretty special individual. But from the time he was probably 7th, 8th, 9th in grade, somebody realized he was special. And they started to train him to make sure that when he was 25, 26, he was actually going to be able to play that football season where he was going to break the single-season record. Played to his max effect for that 60 minutes. It was what we would refer to as a mission profile. They understood what he was going to do, where he was going to go, where we wanted him to be at the age of 25, 26, 27, 28. Well, we have the same thing with the physiological peak is achieved between 28 and 32. Where is that in our demographics? That's our staff sergeants, that's our sergeant first classes, and that's our lieutenants and our junior captains and captains. That's where that's at. But then how do you sustain that for a lifetime throughout? But you have to start with the mission profile. Whether you're going to combat with a parachute on your back, whether you're driving in a truck, whether you're walking 2.5 miles an hour with a rucksack on your back, it is characterized by long periods of aerobic activity, and you never know when that piece in the middle is going to hit you, unless it's a deliberate attack or something like that. But when does that contact occur? And when it does happen, it could be 5 minutes, it could be 10 minutes, it could be 3 hours, it could be all day. We don't know how long that piece in the middle is, but what do we know? We know that you have to be able to very rapidly bring that heart rate down. Got to get your breathing down, because you've got to take a shot, you've got to make a decision, you got to pull people together. You have to do things that require the cognitive to work with the physical so that you're not at an anaerobic state throughout that entire period. Because if you don't, you're not going to succeed. But guess what happens on the back end of that? You got to get home. So you got to be able to get to the fight, you got to be able to win the fight, and you got to be able to get home from the fight. And that's what H2F is about. And if you're training, I get a little frustrated. The ACFT is important, and it's a great event, but it's something you do twice a year. Twice a year. What you do throughout H2F, that's what you do every day. How you train, how you eat, how you sleep. All those things are what you do every single day. Okay, what makes this harder? Next chart. And this isn't to disparage milers and football players, but I'm going to use, this is the part that Eric talked about with periodization, because I think for a soldier, periodization is far more complex and it's far harder than it is for a division athlete or a professional athlete. So I happen to be a middle distance runner in college. And we would start in the off season, in the fall or the summer with, so the two things you see there in terms of the lines and the different types of periodization, and these are oversimplistic, I get it, but volume and intensity. And we would start in the off season with lots of long, slow distance, lots of volume. Then we'd hit an indoor season, we'd start to bring in intensity and speed work on the track. But my entire year was geared towards getting ready for either conference, nationals, or some title event in May, June timeframe. And so that very, like I said, oversimplified between volume and intensity and the speed work that you would do to get ready for, so you could be at your absolute best on one day is what you see there in the upper left. What we just saw in the Paris Olympics from our half milers and our marathoners, those athletes probably trained this entire last year so they could be ready for that one day. Now, if you're a sprinter, you got to run 16 heats to get to the finals. So it's a little bit different, but you're still trying to peak at that one time. Now, what happens if you're a football player? You still have an off-season and an in-season, but you have to sustain that, so it's a parallel periodization for 16, 17, 18 weeks if you make it to the Super Bowl. That is not easy. For soldiers, you don't have an off-season. You got to do this for a lifetime. So what we have talked about is, how do we push out from a programmatic perspective, the notion of compound periodization. What does that look like? How do we do that? But the understanding of macro and micro cycles inside of a lifetime, going back to the mission profile, lifetime of, hey, you're not going to be done playing football at 30. You got to get to 40 or maybe 50 or in my case, 60. How do you sustain a decent quality of life until you're 60 years old? Unless you apply and understand how this all comes together. We got to educate ourselves. We got to capitalize on the teams that are out there, the virtual stuff that's out there. But this is where we need to go with our Army, because at the end of the day, it's going to make us so that we can fight and win on the battlefield. Thanks. Dave, over to you. Okay.
Sir, thank you very much. Great introduction on why we're doing this. What I would tell you is that the H2F program that we're implementing across the Army is the largest human optimization program ever fielded. We're scaling it to the entire Army, and we'll talk about why the impetus was that. If you go to the next slide, I just want to talk a little bit about the return on investment. And this is an investment in our soldiers, our most important weapon system that we have. Here we are at AUSA. There's a lot of kit out on the floor, but we are investing in our soldiers, and not just for that short periodization that the Vice just talked about, but for a lifetime of healthy living that is going to help them endure and enjoy their kids and grandkids into the future. This is truly an investment that will enhance the lethality and the well-being of our soldiers and their family members as we go through time here. So the stats that you see up on this slide are a result of the data that we pulled. We fielded 28 brigades with H2F, and over a 3-year period, we measured those brigades that had H2F versus like brigades that did not have H2F. And the results are pretty astounding, and I won't go through every one of the stats on here, but I want you to think of that, particularly for our folks wearing the uniforms and leaders at various echelons, at what that means to you in terms of folks that are doing better on their weapons qualification scores. The number of referrals that are not happening because we're taking care of problems right there at the source with this holistic team that is able to, with a multi-domain approach different problem sets that's reducing the number of times that a soldier has to go to seek a medical appointment. Or if they do go on profile, they're getting off of it faster because they're training better. They're training more holistically. Because all of these domains that we talk about are very interdependent and interrelated. Now, I would argue I'm not a medic, we got all kinds of medical professionals up here that can talk about it. In my opinion, sleep is the most important. And when you look at the science of sleep and the degraded performance you get on 6 hours or less of sleep at 50% of your cognitive ability, it is striking. The impact that has on every one of the other domains in this approach. So how we do that, how we do sleep hygiene, how we do all of that matters. But you can see the results of 3 years of doing this. And that's what prompted our Army senior leaders to say, why aren't we doing this for the entire Army? Why aren't we doing this for all components? So I'm just going to spend a minute talking to you about what the plan is to do that, how we are actually going to get this done. So if we go to the next slide. So as the Vice briefed, we've got 50 brigades fielded right now, and we are going to 111 brigades through FY27. That's what's funded, that's what's POM for. We're also looking at how we field the rest of the Army, and that's going to take on, depending on how we field this, will take on different shapes. Every brigade it will have the same ratio, right? And the basis of the return on investment that you saw is a ratio of 1 athletic trainer per 600 soldiers and 1 strength and conditioning coach per 300 soldiers. So while you will see a diversification of the size of a team, that ratio is what we're really focused on, because that's what resulted in the return on investment that you just saw. And so as we go through and field different units, different compos, that's how we're approaching the problem, because we don't want to lose the essence of what H2F is, which is a team, a multidisciplinary team that is together, that is executing the training for brigades or like-size units, right? So if we might have several units that are smaller units that we're going to conglomerate around a team to get the same effect. And so right now what we're doing is going installation by installation. We're looking at the population of that installation and figuring out what the best way to do that is. So it'll either be an H2F team assigned to a brigade or an area support team that'll handle multiple smaller units, again, to achieve that same effect. Now, the Vice talked about the National Guard and Reserve, so let me tell you how we're approaching that challenge. So right now, both the Guard and Reserve have been executing pilots since 2018 on how best to implement this across Compos 2 and 3. In FY26, we're going to run about another 12 pilots in the Guard and Reserve to help us refine that data and how we do it. And what we think that looks like are teams that will be fielded to the Guard and Reserve in FY28. We think we'll have, by FY30, we'll have a team in every one of the 54 states and territories to act as a central hub for that expertise with a reach-back capability for those in the Guard. And for the Reserves, we'll have 28, by FY30, we'll have 28 H2F teams assigned around regional commands that, again, will have that same effect. So we are, in fact, working on how we do that. And so how are we going to help you? How are we going to help you do this, right? And the Vice also mentioned the fact that, hey, you might be one of those brigades that's not getting fielded for a while, or one of those Guard or Reserve units that's going to have to wait for a minute. So we're doing some things to help you in the meantime. We have the doctrine, FM 7-22, that is already published, and it has the information you need to begin working these things in your units. FM 22.1 talks about, it'll give you step-by-step instructions on every exercise that you could possibly do in the physical domain for this particular thing. So we've got a lot of information out there. The H2F website just went live about a month ago and has all of the resources that I'm talking about at your fingertips, and we'll make sure that is broadcast out there far and wide. But we're going on even beyond that. We're looking at a holistic health information system that will incorporate all of these things that enable us to take data from soldiers and allow leaders to potentially have a dashboard that will allow them to see the health of your unit and focus those efforts on what's coming next based on the battle rhythm and the metal tasks that unit has to perform. They're getting ready for deployment, they're recovering from a deployment, during a deployment. The commanders will have the ability, and that's why we're pushing this down to brigade commanders. You have the ability to dictate and guide how that H2F team is performing in your particular organization based on the needs that you have for the periodization that the Vice talked about. Okay? We're also training what are called H2F integrators. Okay, and what this does, this is done at Fort Jackson and 4 other sites across the Guard and Reserve. So we have the ability to train over 1,000 of these H2F integrators a year in the Army. And the idea is once we train these H2F integrators and they go perform that function in your unit for a year, and they're certified by the H2F Academy at Fort Jackson, they'll be able to train the trainer in your units. So you'll be able to build this capability over time within your unit as we get these H2F integrators trained. Okay? We're also building an H2F, if you go to the next slide, some of these initiatives are on there, an H2F advisor course. Think of this as a master gunner for H2F. Someone with a little more training and in-depth knowledge of each of the domains and how to tie all those together in your units. And we see this as being an ASI for the individuals that get trained in this. And we think this course will be up and running in FY26 for the H2F advisors out there. But this is, again, another tool that you'll have at your disposal, particularly if you're not getting fielded till later, to be able to do this. And then data-centric modernization. I see several of the vendors in here that are already working in that space. And this isn't anything new. There are vendors out there that are doing these things. It's a matter of how we apply that to the U.S. Army. But we do need a data-centric tool for our commanders to use to assess the health of their units and apply resources where they think they need to be able to meet their mission sets out there. And then we're also doing some pilots on wearables. So lots of wearables folks out here in industry as well. And the NDAA directed us to conduct a pilot using basic training soldiers, which we're getting ready to implement down at Fort Moore, Georgia, here very soon, that help us to gather data on what our soldiers and see if we can get indicators of those health conditions that lead to a better soldier or not for some predictive analysis out there. But I would tell you that there are other pilots going on with wearables in the government today that we're also working with all of those folks. But as the proponent for holistic health and fitness, we just got to be careful about not growing our own flowers out there. We just need to make sure that we're taking advantage of all the work that's going on across the board, capturing that data and making sure that we're using that to inform decisions that'll go. Now, without a doubt, over the period that we're going to be fielding H2F, we are going to continue to learn, and we're going to continue to find best practices out there. And I'll refer you to the H2F handbook that is TTPs on what we've learned to date. This is a living document that we'll continue to update, hang on our website, that'll be available to all of you as you get your teams out there and as we field these teams. So We will come out to see you to do a PDSS about a year before you're getting fielded to make sure you've got the right facilities and to the best we can make it, the conditions set for you to receive your H2F team and immediately implement those things. But again, you don't have to wait. You have the tools at your disposal to make those things happen. And so with that, I look forward to your questions, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Trope.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, General, for inviting me. It's an honor to be here. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your service. I'm Dr. Jennifer Trilk. I'm the founder of Lifestyle Medicine and professor at University of South Carolina School of Medicine, Greenville. We opened our doors 12 years ago, and this is how we train our doctors. So the University of South Carolina School of Medicine, Greenville has fully embraced educating the students on the American College of Lifestyle Medicine's 6 pillars, and you can see them here, very similar to H2F. So looking at nutrition, now guys, this is not just macronutrients, it's not just protein, carbs, and fats. This is what are the micronutrients that are in these foods that are improving and promoting health. We look at anti-inflammatory whole foods that are plant-based, reducing ultra-processed foods, and increasing the CDC guidelines for regular physical activity, improving sleep hygiene, that just as was mentioned. And I will say, as a doctor teaching medical students and as a trained exercise physiologist, I will tell the students, if you have to choose between exercise and sleep, 100% of the time you choose sleep. Exactly what was mentioned before. So if we look at that, obtaining restorative sleep, incredibly important. Avoiding risky substances. Those statistics, sir, that you just demonstrated were profound, 500% reduction in risky substance use. Having positive social connections, so improving the resiliency, reducing isolation, and also making sure that stress is reduced. In doing so, our medical school has become one of 2 institutions, we were the first in the country, to be Platinum Plus certified in lifestyle medicine. So all of these students are being trained in lifestyle medicine. Now this certification means that we train our students to receive over 100 hours, both in the biomedical sciences and the clinical sciences, and cover 100% of the competencies in lifestyle medicine. And that's across all 4 years of the medical school. This curriculum that we developed was recognized at the White House Conference for Hunger, Nutrition, and Health in 2022, and it's now a population health strategy. So we've been asked by other medical schools, how do you train your students in this lifestyle medicine? So it's now, thank you to the White House Conference, being disseminated across all medical schools in the country. Now with this training, our students are equipped to become true practitioners of lifestyle medicine. And what is even more important is that they take charge of their own lives. So healthy doc, healthy patient. This is incredibly important. All of us have been, perhaps, in a time where we were seeing our doctor, and our doctor didn't look like he or she walked the talk. So how are we going to convince our patients to speak with the doctors if the doctor themselves doesn't look like they walk the talk, right? And is not promoting their own health and wellness. Our postgraduate data now indicate that 60% of our students integrate lifestyle medicine into their practice as physicians. And what's even more profound is 70% of them, by learning the mechanisms, the biomedical sciences, the intercellular mechanistic pathways, what's going on between lifestyle and chronic disease, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, dyslipidemia, cardiovascular disease, cancer. So they're now demonstrating that over 70% of our students practice it in their own life. Now, this is across all graduates, just so you know. So this is looking at graduates in surgery, graduates in anesthesiology, and I guarantee that this number is higher in our primary care physicians. So ultimately, our program produces healthier physicians and healthier patients. And what you all are looking to do and what you are doing with H2F is just incredible. And the fact that the Army has over 1 million soldiers in active, in guard, and in reserve is someplace where you can really scale this. So like many of our student doctors and their patients, these soldiers will suffer and probably do suffer from these preventable chronic conditions that I talked about, and that would affect their readiness and ultimately their training in the combat. The United States Army Holistic Health and Fitness Soldier Readiness System is a cutting-edge intervention, and this is why you see me nodding my head as I'm up here watching General speak, and is the same evidence-based practices and principles of the ACLM lifestyle medicine pillars. Now, from my 13 years of experience deploying a similar curriculum of lifestyle medicine in our nation's medical schools, I believe that H2F has incredible potential for this reach that you're all hearing about across the Army and even the other military branches. So I know we're here at a conference for the Army, but truly, how can the other military branches benefit from this? It will improve the health and the well-being of all of our Army soldiers, deliver a strong return on investment, as you saw with the statistics earlier, and at a systems level. So this is very important. One-on-one is incredible, but at a systems level, this is what I see you're able to do. The Army's strategy of be all you can be perfectly focuses on the essential training, is absolutely crucial to deploy across all branches of military readiness, and definitely for the overall health and longevity of the people who serve our amazing country, as General had mentioned before. You guys are looking at this from a lifestyle perspective. So I see some of the audience are the same age as my students, my medical students. And just for you all to understand, where you're starting now, you can prevent your chronic disease, you can prevent your chronic condition over a lifespan. So thank you, and I'm happy to take questions in a little bit.
Thank you, Dr. Troke.
Yeah. Eric, if I could, just before we get into Q&A, just to kind of drive home how important, I cannot see a world where we just cannot do this. I mean, it is a must. It's not negotiable anymore. And as you heard from Dr. and Dave, the return on investment, this is actually, and I won't throw the numbers out there exactly what it is because every brigade is a little different, but the amount of money it takes to stand this up and sustain it, actually we are saving money on the back end of this thing. Absolutely. Not just in the today, here and now, but in the future. But I offer that to you because it's intangible monies that are really hard to bring back. Just because you don't go to the doctor, there is a cost savings there, but we, the Army, may not see that directly. And so the folks that actually sit and do the accounting, they're not going to buy into it. But the reality is we are saving the Army money and we're saving lives on the back end. There are stats, I don't know what they are today, but just a couple of years ago, the average BMI of an 18 to 21-year-old adult male in 1979-80 was about 18%. Today, I think it sits at 31, 32, 33%, which is, that's beyond the standards. Now, what if they get into within our state? And most of them do that come into our military, but their bones, their ligaments, their tendons are not set to do the rigors of what so even if they lose the weight and we don't train them properly in this way, we're going to break them and they're going to be out on the back end. Go into your formation that doesn't have H2F and ask a soldier to squat or deadlift their weight 10 times, and you'll be surprised at how many cannot do that. But yet we put 70, 80 pounds worth of kit on them, and they jump out of a 5-foot window, and we wonder why they blow out their knee. Mm-hmm. And now they go to you. Mm-hmm. And you try to fix them before they come. So we have to do this. And so my message to everybody here and those that are listening is that it's coming. It's going to be an Army program, but it's going to take us a couple years. So in the meantime, we all need to get educated on how to do this, absent the things that are out there. So sorry about that, Aaron.
Sir, may I?
Yeah.
So the CDC demonstrates that $4.2 trillion a year are spent on annual health care costs. And that's across from a population health perspective. $4.2 trillion a year. 90% of that is preventable. 90% from a mental and physical wellness perspective, 90% of that. And that's across the United States. So when we talk about prevention, we need to be all about prevention. And when we look at the chronic disease and you look at military readiness, this is absolutely a huge return on investment, H2F would be.
Thanks. Absolutely, yeah. I think the Army has always been at the forefront of cultural change in this country, and I think this is going to be one of those moments. If you have question cards, please hold them up and someone will come around and grab them. Thank you. I'm going to lead off with a question I had, just an opportunity. General Mingus, we've talked a little bit about the ROI as far as H2F on the warfighter readiness, and I wanted to know if there was a trigger point or a key data point that came back where that was the decision to scale this Army-wide?
It wasn't one. It was all of those, and it was back to my experiences. And one, I didn't need data to convince me, or the chief, and chiefs gave this. I didn't need data to convince me this needed to be in our Army program, and I think the chief was the same way, and the secretary and the undersecretary. It just helped us. I mean, and for those that may or may not be 100% bought in, you can't argue with the data on the back end. So I think it was less about us and more potentially about the others that are out there. But in terms of the return on investment, you knew folks were going to be better, stronger, faster. You knew that there weren't going to be as many injuries, you weren't as many mental health issues, and some of the other things. But just basic stuff like marksmanship scores. I mean, you wouldn't think that would have but just a little bit of a marginal increase, but I guess based on our time, correct, that's out there. But it was profound in terms of the levels, and that's just one data point. There's other marks of lethality that improve, not just marksmanship.
Sir, if I could just add one thing to that. When you look at, just look at the substance abuse numbers, the 500% reduction in substance abuse referrals, and all of you commanders out there know the challenges that come with that, right? You have somebody out of the net, you have multiple leaders that are tied up with that soldier, right? Think of what this is going to do, because substance abuse leads to multiple bad behavior by our soldiers. So think about getting left of that and what this has already done in terms of just the good order and discipline of our formations out there and how much that's going to help you. And when you look at your blotter every weekend and the number of alcohol-related incidents, this is going to help us to get after that. It's going to make our formations better at the same time as well.
Thank you. One of the questions from the audience is, what are Army senior leaders doing to address and improve nutrition and environment on military installations, including the warrior restaurants and the other food options as far as dietary supplements and whatnot?
And so the chief has been on this since he came in. There's a ton of initiatives out there to revamp how we feed our soldiers. We've got Chef Irvine personally helping us figure this out. Heidi Hoyle, our G4, this is her personal mission in life. In like H2F, it's not going to happen overnight at every installation, but this year we are going to begin to move out on some of these pilots. And it's not just where you eat and what you eat, but if the option isn't available to you, and given the crazy hours that we have, the days that we grew up with, I'm trying to remember back mess hall hours, 7:30 to 8:30 or whatever it was, and then 11:30 to 1 at lunch, and then who's off at 1700? And most of the mess halls are closing down at 17:30 at night. Not everybody gets to eat in those very rigid hours. And by the way, studies will tell you that eating more often less is probably better. So kiosks that offer healthy types of things more often throughout the day and open to your schedule, we're trying to make it as flexible as possible. So there's a ton of initiatives you're going to begin to see. I think, Laura, it's 5 installations initially, right? That we're going to kick these food pilots off. But it's absolutely got to be part of it.
Yeah, sir, I think they're also probably referring to the Burger Kings on post. Mm-hmm. Monster drinks in the shopettes and those sorts of things. Now, there's a personal decision that gets made. Somebody asked me that question at PCC. They said, when are you getting rid of Burger King? And I said, well, you do get to have it your way, and it's a choice, right? So, but you're not going to Burger King to get a salad, most likely. Mm. But there are some personal choices that get me made. And what I would argue is that instead of cleaning out the shelves at the shopette and that sort of thing, by training our soldiers what it means to eat, and we're helping them to form habits that allow them to make the decision when they're standing in front of the Monster drink versus the water, or the Burger King versus something healthier, that they're actually consciously making that choice. I think a lot of times we're doing that unconsciously right now. This is going to bring that to the forefront and really train our soldiers how to make good decisions. Then by default, once we get this across the Army, they're not going to sell that stuff, so it's going to come out of there just from a retail perspective. So I think the more important thing is training our soldiers how to make those healthy decisions and the impact on their lives if they don't.
And I think, too, when we think about food and nutrition, I said before, you're not just your macronutrients, but your micronutrients. Everything that we put into our mouths, I said this at a congressional briefing on Capitol Hill, everything that we put in our mouths is either pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. And if we don't know that, if we don't have that education that something is helping feed our brain in the proper way, or it's creating inflammation in our brain to have the reduction in decision making, it's really, really important. As I mentioned earlier, the medical students who are physicians, because they're getting the education in the classroom, they're making better choices outside of the classroom, and they're improving their own health. So being able to educate that and also provide those choices. And when there are areas of not having as many choices, dehydrating fruits, dehydrating vegetables, making sure that the anti-inflammatory properties are there, the fibers there, the nutrients are there. Ways that we can illustrate how to improve the nutrition pattern, I think, is really important.
Thank you, Dr. Trilk. General Francis, several H2F teams recently lost positions, staff, some going down from 34 to 22, mainly strength coaches and the athletic trainers who are on the forefront of the program being the positions cut. Are these teams staying at that lower level of packs? And if so, or if not, how are they going to be tailored back to size?
Yeah. So to scale this to 111 brigades and beyond, we did take the initial tranche that we put out there, which was anywhere between 35 and 37 folks on one of these H2F teams, and have brought it down to about 22 as the baseline. Now, what I would tell you, I refer you back to what I said about the ratio of athletic trainers and strength and conditioning coaches to the number of soldiers. So while you'll see the structure remain the same, the number of athletic trainers and strength and conditioning coaches will expand and retract based on the population that they're serving there. The goal is to maintain that ratio that drove the return on investment that we saw here. So that will go up and down, and funding and resourcing does matter on these things, but that's where we are in this, and the Vice has approved us to take a look installation by installation at the population. So we may not see a uniform team everywhere. It's going to be tailored based on the population that team is servicing.
And if you go back to, and we don't need to go back there, but the chart, why that upper left was important. Culture, the equipment, the subject matter experts, the facilities, all the things that go into that. The combination of the subject matter experts, once we get our leaders, squad leaders, platoon leaders, company commanders, educated to they're never going to replace a knee, they're never going to do brain surgery, but they have to have a modicum of understanding of how to assess, program, and execute underneath the supervision of a subject matter expert. And once you've promulgated that throughout a formation, it takes actually less than what we initially thought. And I go back to my days at the University of Tennessee. When I was there as an APMS, I got to know Coach John Stuckey very, very well, who was one of the forefronts on ground-based strength and conditioning training. One head strength and conditioning coach, one assistant, 4,000 Division I athletes, and a bunch of grad assistants. So with a handful of folks, they were able to manage that 4,000 person population. So you don't need a strength and conditioning coach for every trooper. The ratios that Dave, there's science and data behind that. Once you have that and you've got the folks in the formation trained, either at the schoolhouse and others, that's when the program starts to kind of take off.
Sure. Thank you, sir. We have a question about implementation of H2F for Army nurses who are working in the hospital and maybe not doing normal unit training.
Is my daughter in here? All right. I have a second lieutenant Army nurse, and she called me the other day and said, hey, she's also expecting, and so she was calling me about the P3T program, the postpartum performance training that we do for our soldiers that give birth and want to get back into the Army lifestyle, because we do want our soldiers to not have to pick between having a family or staying in the Army. And this is one of the investments that the Army is making. That, quite frankly, fell off for about a year, and we're bringing that back. But one of the things she did call me about was, hey, I'm a nurse, I work shift work, and I don't have those things available. So again, I would go back to we have the doctrine, we have all of the capabilities. You have videos that are being made by the H2F team here, particularly for certainly all the H2F functions that we've talked about, plus P3T, that are available to anybody that wants them right now. So you don't have to wait for a team to be fielded, or if you're working a schedule that doesn't lend itself to doing that, you do have reach back capability, both to our H2F team here and to your H2F teams wherever you happen to be. So you do have everything that you need to do that. You have to decide you're going to do it, and then we'll get you the help that you need to do that on a shift schedule there. So I hear you, nurses out there, and anybody else that's working. If you're working in a JOC, the 12-hour shift, there are jobs out there in the Army that make that challenging from a scheduling perspective. But we have all the resources at your fingertips right now to help you form a program for yourself and work through whatever challenge you're facing out there.
Is that going to be one of the modalities on the app?
It will.
No?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir, it will.
Thank you, sir. What is, excuse me, what are we seeing as one of the most effective mental health wellness tools within the program today? And also maybe, Dr. Troke, you can add a little bit of your expertise on this after.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mental wellness.
Yes.
All right. So when we look at it from a physician perspective, sleep obviously is very first. It is paramount to make sure that the sleep is there. Mindfulness is key. So being aware of surroundings, not doing task switching, not having as much executive function, not having as many files open in the brain as possible, making sure that what is being taken care of is taken care of at hand, and you're not necessarily looking at the other things. So mindfulness is the big key that we look at. Social connectivity is the other one. Building your social relationships, making sure you've got the social support or the support of your comrades and your friends and your people and your family. I heard early in one of the panels that God first, family second, and then service third. And when I was listening to that panel, I thought, having that spiritual aspect, and we have it in the readiness. So having spiritual, those non-physical domains, and having a calling that's higher than yourself, and also whatever spiritual entity that you think about, whether it's the universe, whether it's God, whether it's Jesus, whether it's Buddha, really being able to continue to connect for that being a higher purpose. That's been extremely helpful from a mental readiness perspective for the physicians, for sure.
Thanks. So I wanted the doc to give you the medical opinion first. From a layman's perspective, what I know is if you don't sleep well enough, your cognitive ability goes down immediately and profoundly, depending on how much sleep that you get. And the science is all there. If you are not taking care of yourself physically, if you're not eating right, it all affects both your cognitive and your physical ability to do what we need you to do as soldiers, and affects your long-term well-being for you and your family down the road. And so when we talk about, this is why the elements of H2F, the domains, are all interrelated. You can't take one out and just focus on one of them, right? And I think a lot of times we tend to focus on the physical domain, being in the Army, but I would argue that sleep is the most important from a layman's perspective, and all of the other ones feed into that. When one of those things isn't working the way it's supposed to, it affects all the others, and then it has a domino effect. So, everything that we're doing is about helping us to be better cognitively at the same time. Now, in addition to that, when we're teaching A2F, and your H2F team will come and they'll do cognitive drills with you and your team, just to help keep that mental acuity going and improving over time as well. But all of the domains interact with one another. So you can't just say, what are we doing in one space, because they all are interrelated and interdependent.
Sir, I think you've become my best friend when it comes to sleep.
Yeah.
So just one final to follow up on that is, every time that we're thinking, remember I talked about executive function, every time that we're using our brain to think, we're utilizing our brain, we're increasing something called adenosine in our brain. So we're breaking down our energy, increasing adenosine in our brain. We're also increasing our reactive oxygen species. We're increasing the oxidative stress in our brain. And many of us are familiar with oxidized vehicles, right? The rust on the vehicles. We're used to looking at a yellow, remember newspapers, everybody? Newspapers. So when newspapers became yellow, the oxidation that happens with the newspapers, that's what's happening in our brain. And the one thing that happens when we sleep is that melatonin, which is the largest antioxidant molecule in our body, increases, clears out the reactive oxygen species. We're able to regenerate the ATP and drop down the adenosine. We've all had that 2 p.m. tiredness, and I'm sure many other things with service. But when we're feeling that and we don't get adequate sleep, and that continues on, we've got inflammation in the brain. We've got adenosine buildup in the brain. Short term, not able to make decisions. Long term, an increase for risk for Alzheimer's and dementia.
So just in the title, I mean, mind, body, soul, sleep, nutrition, and the term on the front end of that, holistic. I've been, unfortunately, around long enough where we as an Army have tried to deal with piece parts of that, but never like this in a holistic way. And there's a saying out there that, hey, the last time I checked, the head and the body are inextricably linked by this thing called the neck. But yet we love to separate the two and think they are different things, but they are intertwined, as Dave and the doctor said. I mean, you cannot separate them, and you must treat it as the whole thing. And all those go together, and why this program is so important.
Thank you. How is H2F Part 2 course different from the H2F Advisor?
Yeah, so I'll hit that. So when you think of the H2F integrator, it's what we used to refer to as our master fitness trainer, with the addition of a little bit more about the domains and how they interact with one another to help bring some of that expertise back. The H2F Advisor is going to be probably an 8 to 9 week course. It's being written as we speak. That will go far more into depth for that H2F Advisor that is there to advise the commander on how to employ that team most effectively based on the mission that particular unit has, or the particular challenges they're facing with individuals in that unit. And so it'll be the H2F Advisor will be a much more in-depth trained soldier that will be able to bring that expertise back. But the H2F integrators will understand the functions of the program, and really down to that even battalion and even company level. Again, we can do about 1,000 a year right now, a little over 1,000 a year. We can do that. That gets you that expertise right off the bat. And I will tell you that we already have folks out there implementing it. There's an E5 in the old guard, which does not have an H2F team yet, that is absolutely crushing it because of his passion for this program and what it's doing. We actually bring that E5 to Pre-Command Course of Fort Leavenworth to talk to the future brigade and battalion commanders out there because of how effective this one individual has been for that unit. So you find the right folks out there, we get them trained, they can be a powerful catalyst for you in implementing this program, particularly if you don't have the team yet.
Thank you, sir. Considering funding as a proverbial gatekeeper, can you discuss what specifically changed in the perception of return on investment in such programs, and has that made securing funding more accessible comparing active duty military or civilian support initiatives?
I mean, it was simple math. It literally is. And we've had, where we started was the initial 28 that we fielded, and they just did the side-by-side comparison of folks who used to go get treatment, lost training days, how quickly they were coming back when they were injured, and they actually ran the data, and they feel very, very confident in that data. It's about, for an average brigade, and I said I wasn't going to throw it out there, but on an average brigade, one of the normal-sized organizations, it costs about $3 million to stand up an H2F program in a brigade. It takes about $2.5 million to sustain it over time, but the return on investment is over $3 million a year for that individual brigade. So those are kind of the raw numbers that are out there. I think those will adjust a little bit, so I wouldn't go to the bank on what that is, but we know that the return on investment, just from a financial perspective and the data that we have thus far, it's paying for itself.
Thank you, sir. I think we touched on this a little bit, but is the plan to eventually scale H2F to the reserve component and the geographic dispersion that can be posing a challenge with multiple units that aren't near H2F teams in their state? How kind of are we going about that?
Yeah. So certainly, in addition to the National Guard and Reserve, right? And we have, you have a National Guard brigade that might be spread over 6 states. You have little, we have little camps, posts, and stations across the Army. But we also have other kinds of units, like recruiting units. How do we have the challenge of all the recruiting stations out there? Our SFABs that are deployed all over the world. Our multi-domain task force that are deployed not all in the same place. So being able to deliver this capability will adjust based on what type of unit it is and where it is. The central theme remains the same. We want to have the expertise down at the unit level at a minimum in terms of an H2F integrator or an H2F advisor, and we can produce enough of those to get them across to the Army and all the disparate places that we're going, that has the expertise to reach back. If I'm in the National Guard unit, I'll reach back to my central hub that'll be in a state for all that expertise that is required and individual counseling if required to meet that same end state. If I'm in the reserve in one of the 28 regional commands we're going to set up or teams we're going to set up across the regional commands, that will be how we go back and have that reach back expertise for there. Same thing for recruiting units, SFABs, multi-domain task forces. Again, the doctrine is there, the tools are all there. We have a method to get you expertise sooner than you're potentially getting fielded, and we want to implement these things as rapidly as we possibly can to assist all this. But we do have folks that are deployed in different shapes and sizes, but everybody has the opportunity to employ the holistic health and fitness program in their unit.
Thank you, sir. I think we need to get Dr. Troke back in the mix of this. Dr. Troke, what can the Army learn from the experience you can provide as far as holistic health and fitness, and how do you see it actually having long-term effects on soldiers' wellness?
I absolutely see from a lifetime perspective that you are increasing, if you notice, it says Jennifer Trilk Human Performance Laboratory. And when I talk to my students and teach my future doctors, we're thinking about human performance across the lifespan. We're not just looking at human performance higher, faster, stronger, what is Sidious, Altius, Fortius, higher, faster, stronger, but what is happening in terms of being able across the lifespan when we all age and we're all set up to be increased risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, cancers, Alzheimer's, dementia. What are things that we can do to prevent that across the lifespan? How can we maintain optimal human performance from the peak performance through, and I've had this, I work with cancer patients, a patient who's undergone chemotherapy, so much so that she's had severe cancer cachexia and is not able to get off of the toilet or stand up without using her arms. So when we think about performance as a spectrum, it's really, really important to maintain overall health and wellness throughout the lifespan and to train and teach everyone, whether it's the service, whether it's our patients, whether it's the population, how incredibly important it is to prevent chronic diseases and prevent injuries, as the general had mentioned, and be able to return quickly, as the general had mentioned.
Thank you. Here's a question asking more so about the families of soldiers, and they're getting at when soldiers go home, their spouses are primarily the ones cooking them dinner, making their meals, and how are we integrating the entire family into H2F and what we're learning?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic point, right? Because you can be a believer all day long, and then you go home and your spouse cooked you a dinner, and it's a risky proposition saying, nope, not H2F certified. Sorry, you're going to have to go back to the grocery store.
You probably get away with that one time.
Start over. But that's right. You probably only get away with that once. But it is a great point. And everything
my wife, who's in the back of the room, makes is perfect. It's awesome. I love you, baby.
Yeah, all right. Sir, good call. But the education of families, and so when we talk about this increases the lethality and the well-being of our soldiers and families, we mean that. The H2F website is an open API site, so our family members can have access to that same information as well. And I would tell you that if you do it as a family, you're going to be way better off than if you're trying to do it as an individual, and then you go home and you may not be getting the same thing here. So I will tell you that in the Francis family, we're doing that collectively, and I would encourage everybody to do the same. Brings the family together, gives you common goals to go after, even teenagers, and it really helps you to educate your family for their long-term well-being as well. So there's nothing that restricts it. We can't obviously fund teams that are going to just be solely for family members, but I would tell you that the information and the ability to tap into that is there for our family members, and I would encourage everybody out there to bring your entire family into this process.
That is fantastic. That is identically aligned with the family unit and what we do in clinic. So if your patient is Sir, and the wife is the one who's cooking, who is going grocery shopping, who is doing all of that, it is so imperative to bring the entire family unit in for that consultation. We know that the data demonstrates that family meals increases academic success in teenagers. So at least 2 family meals a week increases grades, increases academic success for the children. Bringing in that entire family unit is key. I love hearing that alignment.
Thank you. What are the key products and services necessary for us to see successful implementation of the Army's H2F program?
So we already have the baseline, right? We've established what we think the team looks like. We've established that what echelon we want to field these teams. So we have those tools out there. Again, what I mentioned up front are some of the things that we're working on. I think a holistic health and fitness information system that allows commanders and even individuals to see themselves is very helpful. Like, I got a 75 on my sleep score last night. That tells me that at about 1,500, I just need to go home, right? Because that's where my cognitive ability is going to tank.
It's already there.
Right? Some are faster. Everyone's unique. Mine burns faster than others. So we are doing wearables pilots. And for those of you that have them, right, you start monitoring yourself whether you like it or not. You just can't help yourself, right? I just bought my wife an Oura Ring. And we got devices there, but now you look at it and you're like, I didn't sleep that well last night, or I didn't eat. And once you start doing that and you get the individual to start catching on to this, you will never turn that off, right? As long as you have a wearable, you're looking at how well you exercise, if it was a performance enhancing workout or not, and talks to you about sleep, your heart rate, all those indicators that people want to know about themselves. From a command perspective, wouldn't it be great to have aggregate data, not about individuals, but aggregate data that really showed you the health of your unit and allowed you to give some precision guidance to your H2F team saying, hey, I've got to fix musculoskeletal things, or we're getting ready to go operate in the mountains, and we need some better aerobic training to prepare for that, as the Vice talked about, but doing it in a holistic way. So we need an information system that we're developing a requirement for right now. As we experiment with wearables, I think anyone that has them sees the benefit of them intrinsically and right off the bat. And if we can harness that in such a way that it will keep soldiers anonymous, but allow commanders to see their formations a little better, I think that's going to be good. We're running a pilot on that down at Fort Moore, as I mentioned here, in the very near future, and we're going to take that data and help to inform the requirement that helps us with the information system. And then where does the Army want to go if the Army wants to spend that kind of resources on wearables? But I would tell you, once you have one, you're going to want one, even if you have to pay for it. And I think that the benefits of that data will help individuals, and it has an extreme potential to help commanders writ large prepare their units for what's coming.
Programmatically too, and so there's all the IT things and the data that's going to help us. There's the things that we talked about, what we're doing on the nutrition and how we feed our soldiers, but we're going to resource and pay beyond the 111 the resources and the actual kit that it's going to take to execute functional fitness. So there's the assess, program, and execute. But how you treat that, as an example, if you go down into a company troop battery and you go out to their motor pool and you get with their maintenance team, there's at least 1, 2, 3, 4 general mechanics toolboxes for pick a number of type of vehicles that are out. We wouldn't dream of not having a general mechanics toolbox in the motor pool to take care of that Humvee or an ISV or whatever the platforms that it is. But seems like you have to jump through hoops to get a gym in a box down at the company level, and we've got to figure out all these other methods and means. Now, we are the good news talking to the teams on the floor. A lot of this stuff is hitting the NSNs, but that, in my opinion, ought to be on a company commander's property book, so that it programmatically now, every time you break a piece of stuff, lose a piece of stuff, there's an ordering mechanism. You're held accountable to make sure that it's all on hand. But that's just an example of how we're going to continue to mature this program, because that, in my mind, is the general mechanics toolbox for the soldier.
May I also, so you mentioned intrinsic motivation. That's part of behavior change. And when we look at the data, you've got education and you've got motivation, and you need both in order to see behavior change. There are all these different models, trans-theoretical model of behavior change, looking at moving individuals from pre-contemplation to contemplation to preparation to action and to maintenance. And knowing where that behavior change is, you're smiling for...
We need to come up with an acronym for that.
Okay. Right, so that's intrinsic motivation. I think my question as a panelist is when we look at mental health, sleep, nutritional readiness, physical and spiritual, as part of evolution, what's being done in H2F for behavior change, reducing barriers of behavior change?
Well, I think we're going to discover some of those things. So interestingly, at the pre-command course, I had a sergeant major ask me, "Hey, sir, you've been talking about sleep. Got it, but are we going to get out of this, 4 soldiers per barracks room, as we improve our barracks situation over time?" There are those that had the questions about when are we getting rid of the stuff in the PX and the Burger Kings and those sorts of things. So I think as we discover where we are inhibiting soldiers from being able to implement that, we're going to learn from this. And we're going to learn that, hey, 4 soldiers in a barracks room is not conducive to good sleep. Or it is if you have the right conditions and you're taping up all the lights and, doing the things that, Dr. Tahan does whenever she goes to a hotel. But we're going to learn from this, and we're going to get feedback like that from our leaders out there. And then we have to tee that up as an Army and go, okay, what are the things that we can do to help set the conditions? This is going to go beyond just the team there. This is going to help us to discover as an Army where we can, as an institution, improve our foxhole to allow our soldiers to be better, healthier, and more lethal at the end of the day. And where we discover these things, we bring these up to the Army leadership, and then we figure out a strategy to go after those things. So I think we're going to continue to learn as we field these teams and as we gather more data, and as leaders start to assess this and say, okay, I'm trying to implement H2F in my unit, but I don't have the right place to sleep, I don't have the right place to eat. So we'll get, Victory Fresh that we have down at Fort Jackson. That's, that Chef Irvine has helped us to do. And then we look at, can we scale this to the Army? And what will that result in? And how can we actually make those things happen and those improvements?
Doc, if I go back to your experience on the family and the lifestyle question we had earlier, so my perception and my assumption and my experience is if you find a soldier or a service member that lives a healthy lifestyle and all the components that we're talking about, not always, but you generally find a family then that kind of lives that same
Correct.
lifestyle. But as we promote this to the whole Army and we introduce new people to this type of lifestyle, what is your understanding, or what have you seen on the civilian side? Does the same thing happen that we see in the military on the smaller side?
It does,
Okay.
Absolutely it does. So again, that family unit, success is dependent completely on that family unit. So having that behavior change and having someone who's trying to maybe lose adiposity, improve their body composition, as we were talking earlier, being able to be that healthier person, you absolutely have to have that internal support, that inner circle of support. So educating and motivating from that family unit perspective is essential for success.
Thank you, Doctor. We are about out of time, so I'm going to turn it over to each of you for any kind of closing remarks you might have. I'll start with you, sir.
One, thanks for being here. Thanks for the folks that are out there. We are bringing this to the whole Army. It's going to be an Army program, and it's not just for 111 brigades. We have to do this. We must do this. We can't afford not to do it because it's going to make our soldiers and, as talked about by our colleagues, our whole family units just better than what they are today. In the lethality, because that's what we exist to do, is to deter war, and if God forbid that fails, we have to be able to fight and win. And when you look at the business of fighting and winning, it is hard. It's physical, and it requires strength and endurance and stamina and agility and all those things, not just endurance. And when you get into it, it's nasty. And we want as many of our troops to come home as that go. And the only way that we can help guarantee, this is the one thing we absolutely control. I don't know when the perfect high-energy laser is going to come online. I don't know when the perfect high-powered microwave is going to come online. I don't know when, other than generalities, when the next hypersonic missile is going to actually be out there and doing things. But this is what we can do today with the resources. There's no reliance on technology. We have to do it, and it is at least 50 or 60% of the equation when you're talking about lethality. And so we have to do this. And so I appreciate everybody coming, appreciate you listening, and help us continue to tell the story.
Sir, thanks, and to all our panel members here, I appreciate the expertise and the passion that you bring to this. I will just say one thing, and for those of you at various levels of getting a team deployed to you, you don't have to wait. And you can reach back to the CIMT H2F team with whatever questions and whatever we can do to help you get up and running as quickly as possible. We are at your disposal to do that while we work on getting the Army fielded there. But appreciate your time today and the passion today. This is a really important subject that's going to really improve the performance of our Army.
Thank you, sir. I have been doing this for 13 years. We opened our doors in 2012. We had 1,200 applications for 50 slots when we opened our doors for the medical school. We now have 4,600 applications for 110 slots every year. The vast majority of candidates who want to come to our school do it because of the lifestyle medicine program. And that comes directly from the Senior Associate Dean for Admissions. There are doctors who are looking for this type of training. And the fact that you are looking, we haven't really talked about, like, will the soldiers like it? You know, and at the end of the day, this is something that is being sought out after very hardly by candidates who are our future doctors. So I just want to thank you all for doing what you're doing and completely support the holistic health and fitness for the soldiers. And remember, it's through the lifespan. So it's as we get into retirement, how are we maintaining population health?
And I would just a shout out to Dr. Trilk, who came to us from doing hurricane relief in South Carolina, and then she's turning around and going right back to do that. So let's give her a round of applause.
General Mingus, General Francis, Dr. Trilk, thank you so much for your time this evening or this afternoon. And audience, thank you all for attending and asking amazing questions. I think the best part I saw out of all of this was we're still learning. And you kind of hit that, General Francis, and we don't have all the answers, but we're trying to figure them all out, and it's for the welfare of the Army and welfare of the soldier, which is amazing to see. That is the end of the H2F panel. I'm going to turn it over to General Les. Yeah.
Thank you all to our panel for such an insightful discussion. On behalf of AUSA, we really appreciate it. Please take time before you depart this annual meeting to visit our education booth and see what we have out there, and also to tell us why you serve through our podcast or our graphic illustration. Thank you for attending, and please check out our additional contemporary military forums this afternoon and tomorrow. Thank you.